Here's a lesson for 2-7, standard form and intercepts. So in this lesson, we're going to talk about x-intercepts and y-intercepts. We're familiar with y-intercepts, but now we're going to get a little bit familiar with x-intercepts. So an x-intercept is a point where the line crosses the x-axis. It's written in the form something, comma, x, where that first blank is going to be what your x-intercept is. And to solve for the x-intercept, you plug in for y equals 0 and solve for x, because we know that the y value for all x-intercepts is 0. So to get the x value, we just have to plug in 0 for y. So for y-intercepts, that's the point where the line crosses the y-axis. It's written in the form, sorry, the formatting's weird here, 0, comma, blank, where this is the y-intercept. When the equation is written in slope-intercept form, it's y equals mx plus b, where 0, comma b is the y-intercept. But you can also solve for the y-intercept by plugging in x equals 0 and solving for y. The reason we can do that is because the x value for any y-intercept is 0. So to get a little visual here, if we have our coordinate plane, right, and we graph our line right here, this is going to be my x-intercept, and the coordinates for this point is going to be something, comma, 0, so whatever it is on the x-axis here. And for a y-intercept, our line might look something like this. This is our y-intercept, and the point would be written as 0, comma, something, because any point on the y-axis is always going to be 0, comma, something. All right, so let's take a look at a couple examples when our equation's written in slope-intercept form. We're going to identify some characteristics. We're going to identify the slope, x-intercept, and y-intercept. So since it's written in y equals mx plus b, slope-intercept form, we know that the number in front of x is going to be my slope, and the constant term is going to be my y-intercept. So looking here at my equation, y equals negative 2x plus 7, my slope is going to be m equals negative 2, and my y-intercept is 7, but remember our y-intercept is always written as a point, so it's going to be 0, comma, 7. So to find my x-intercept, what we're going to do is we're going to plug in y equals 0, because we know our x-intercept is going to be something, comma, 0, so we're going to plug in y equals 0. So this is going to be 0 equals negative 2x plus 7. So now we need to solve for x. So we have to undo everything that's happening, so we're going to subtract 7 from both sides. So 0 minus 7 is negative 7 equals negative 2x, and then we're going to divide both sides by negative 2. So x, we can put that in our calculator, and that's just going to be positive 3.5. So that means my y-intercept is going to be 3.5, comma, 0. Okay. Alternatively, we could, if we wanted, leave it as a fraction as 7 over 2. Okay. Let's look at b. So again, it's written in y equals mx plus b, so I have m and b. M is 3, so my slope is 3. And then my y-intercept is going to be 0, comma, 6. To find my y-intercept, like we said before, we're going to plug in y equals 0, because our x-intercept is going to be written as something, comma, 0. So it's going to be 0 equals 3x plus 6. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 6, so I'm doing the opposite. So 0 minus 6 is negative 6 equals 3x. And then we're going to divide both sides by 3. So negative 6 divided by 3 is going to be negative 2. So that means my x-intercept is going to be negative 2, comma, 0. All right, so we're used to seeing equations written in the form y equals mx plus b, which is slope-intercept form. Well, here's another way you can write a linear equation. It's called standard form, and it's written as ax plus by equals c. The reason why I know that this is linear is, remember, in a linear equation, there's no exponents or anything on x. It's just a plain old x. So let's look at a couple examples here. It says determine the slope. So same thing, we're identifying the same characteristics. Slope, x-intercept, y-intercept of the following lines. Well, since it's written in standard form, we can't easily identify the slope because it's not written in mx plus b. So instead, let's find the x and the y-intercepts. Remember, to find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in y equals 0. So that's going to be written as 0, something comma 0. So let's do that first. So we have 4x plus 2 parentheses 0. So we're plugging in 0 for x equals 24. Well, remember that anything times 0 is just 0. So basically this goes away. It ends up being 4x plus 0 equals 24. So we just have 4x equals 24. So now just to solve for x, we're just going to divide both sides by 4. So now I have x equals 24 divided by 4 is going to be 6. So my x-intercept is going to be 6 comma 0. Now to find my y-intercept, we're going to plug in x equals 0. And my y-intercept we know is going to be 0 comma something. So we're going to plug in 0 for x. So 4 times 0 plus 2y is equal to 24. And just like before, we know that anything times 0 is just 0. So we end up with just 2y equals 24. So to solve for y, we just divide everything by 2. So we get y is equal to 12. So my y-intercept is 0, 12. So to find my slope, there's a couple ways we could do it. We can convert this equation to slope-intercept form, or what we can do is we can use our x and y-intercepts and find the slope. So I think that's the easier way. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to sketch a picture of this graph. Okay, so I'm going to draw in, it doesn't have to be a perfect picture. I know my x-intercept is 6, 0, so that might be here. And then my y-intercept is 0, 12. So we know that this is going to be my line. So I can already see that my slope is going to be negative. And we can count our rise and our run. Well, to go down here, to get to this point, we would have to go down 12. And to go to the right, we would have to go to the right 6. So my slope is going to be negative 12 over 6, which we can divide into just negative 2. So my slope is negative 2. All right, let's do another one here. So to find my x-intercept, I know that's going to be something comma 0, so I'm going to plug in y equals 0. So when we plug in y equals 0, we have negative 5x plus 3 times 0 is equal to 30. And we know that anything times 0 is just 0. So then I just have negative 5x equals 30 divided by negative 5. So x is negative 6. So my x-intercept is going to be negative 6 comma 0. And then for my y-intercept, we know it's going to be 0 comma something. So we're going to plug in x equals 0. So it's going to be negative 5 times 0 plus 3y is equal to 30. And we know that anything times 0 is just 0. So we just have 3y is equal to 30. And then we're going to divide both sides by 3. So we have y is equal to 10. Now to get my slope, I'm just going to sketch a picture here. So I have my x-intercept at negative 6, 0. And then I have my y-intercept at 10 comma 0 or 0 comma 10. So my line is going to look like this. So I know that my slope is going to be positive. My rise, I have to go up 10, and my run, I go over 6. So my slope is going to be 10 over 6. So if you can simplify, you should, meaning if there's a number that you can divide the top and bottom by, you should. So I can divide the top and the bottom both by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So my slope would be 5 over 3. Now let's graph on a graph using the x and y intercepts for the equations written in standard form. So first I'm going to find my x-intercepts, or x-intercept. And for that, we're going to plug in y equals 0. So it's going to be 3x minus 6 times 0 is equal to 6. This goes to 0. So then I'm just going to divide by 3. So x is equal to 2. So my x-intercept is going to be 2, 0, which is right here. And then for my y-intercept, we're going to plug in x equals 0. So 3 times 0 minus 6y is equal to 6. 3 times 0 is 0, so I'm left with negative 6y equals 6, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 6. So y is negative 1. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 1. So from here we can graph our line. Might be a good idea, since we're graphing, to keep graphing points if we can, so following that same pattern. So here I have my line, and we're done with this one. All right, so let's take a look at another example. So I'm going to first find my x-intercept by plugging in y equals 0. So negative 9x plus 3 times 0 is equal to negative 27. 3 times 0 is just 0. So we're going to divide both sides by negative 9. Negative 27 divided by negative 9 is going to be positive 3. So my x-intercept is going to be 3, 0. And then to find my y-intercept, we're going to plug in x equals 0. So negative 9 times 0 plus 3y is equal to negative 27. And 9 times 0 is just 0. So I'm going to divide by 3. Negative 7 divided by 3 is negative 9. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, negative 9. And then we can go ahead and draw our line. So one thing I do want to point out here is that depending on how accurate you draw your line, it may not be easy to find another point on the line. So when finding the slope, you should use the x-intercept. So for instance, if I wanted to know what the slope was of this equation, I'm going to use my x-intercepts as my 2 points. So from negative 9, I now have to go up 9. So that's going to be my rise. And I have to go over 3. So that's going to be my run, which means my slope is just going to be 3. And in fact, if I wanted to write this equation in slope-intercept form, I could, because I already know that my y-intercept is 0, negative 9, which means b is negative 9. So if I wanted to write this equation in slope-intercept form, I could. It would be y equals 3x minus 9. So one thing to point out that these two equations here, negative 9x plus 3y equals negative 27, is the same as y equals 3x minus 9. They just look different, but they are both referring to the same line, which is this line here. All right, let's take a look at a couple examples from the homework. So starting with number 1, we're identifying the slope, y-intercept, and x-intercept. So this one is written in slope-intercept form, so we should be able to easily identify the slope. So the slope is just going to be that number in front of x. So that's going to be m equals negative 9. And then my y-intercept is going to be that constant term being added or subtracted. In this case, it's added. It's 27. But remember, y-intercept is a point, so we would write it as 0, 27. To find our x-intercept, we're going to have to plug in y equals 0, because remember our x-intercept is written in the form something, comma, 0. So we just have to plug this in for y. So 0 equals negative 9x plus 27. So solving for x, there's a couple ways you can do it. So I'm going to actually subtract 27. Sorry. So 0 minus 27 is negative 27. And then from here, divide both sides by negative 9. So negative 27 divided by negative 9 is going to be positive 3. So my x-intercept is going to be 3, 0. All right, these ones we're finding the x and y-intercepts, then we're graphing the line using the intercepts. So first, to find my x-intercept, we're going to plug in y equals 0. So negative 4x plus 9 times 0 is equal to 36. 9 times 0 is 0, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. 36 divided by negative 4 is going to be negative 9. So my x-intercept is going to be negative 9, 0. And then to find my y-intercept, I'm going to plug in x equals 0. So negative 4 times 0 plus 9y is equal to 36. And negative 4 times 0 is just 0, so divide both sides by 9. 36 divided by 9 is 4. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, 4. So it looks something like that.